for a long time.
Homestead.
Informal, don't have to recognize, just don't all talk at one time, I guess, so. And it looks like the people visiting mental health and DNR have some kind of a PowerPoint presentation. Is that what we're seeing, or are we just gonna talk about the letters and that we didn't sign on to your proposed subdivision? And for, we listed the reasons of, why we were concerned, so it'd be great to get that developed, to get more, lots available for development in the Petersburg Borough. So if anybody else has any input, just start the conversation. I don't know, we don't have an agenda, so
yeah, we can go ahead and get started. Maybe we'll start with introductions on our
let's
side. and-
just go around the room and introduce people at the dais and the tables.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so could start over here with this. And you have to speak into the microphone fairly close. Sorry about that.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chris Hess. I'm the Deputy Director for the Division of Mining, Land and Water with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
I'm Amy Orange Posma. I'm with the survey section and the planning officer for the unorganized borough, which, as you know, outside of your service area 1, DNR was retained as planning authority when you became a borough. So we're hoping you guys pass your code soon.
So we could take the plotting authority?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chandler Long, and I am the Senior Project Manager for the Trust Land Office. I work for Jeff, and this is my project, the South Mitkoff subdivision.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Green. I'm the Deputy Director at the Trust Land Office.
And then we've got the manager and Becky Regulus, our deputy clerk. Bob?
Yeah, I'm Bob Lynn, one of the assembly members. Thank you.
And I'm Thomas Van Walsh, Assembly.
Marsh, Assembly?
Mark Jensen, Borough Mayor.
Scott Newman, Assembly.
And we have 2 assembly members that couldn't make it tonight. One's out on a boat putting fish in a pond for rearing, and the other one had business. So we'll just continue on with the conversation. And how can we work together to, agree on, come to a consensus on what we want, the borough, and then, can we do that for, the road easement size and utility easements? And I think that was a couple of our main concerns. So.
Yeah, if it's okay with the assembly, I was going to start with just a brief kind of overview of the Trust Land Office and what we do and how we got here, because we are a very unique landowner. The trust itself is extremely unique. It's the only mental health trust in the country. So if that's okay with you all, it should only take a few minutes. I think it might help just provide a little bit of context for why we do what we do and how we got here, kind of.
Sounds good to be educational.
Okay, all righty. Well, yeah, again, thanks for the opportunity to come talk to you all tonight about the trust and the South Mitkoff subdivision project. And like I said, before we dive into that, I just want to give a quick overview of how we got here, how the trust formed, and why it exists. The history of the trust goes back to 1956. Prior to statehood, the territory of Alaska at the time, there were limited services for people that had any sort of mental illness or mental health issues, addictions, cognitive disabilities, things of that nature. And often when they were diagnosed, if they needed treatment, they were sent out of the territory. A common place was Morningside Hospital. It was down in Oregon. And many of those folks never came back to Alaska. They never saw their families again. And at the time, the delegation from the territory were concerned by that, and they lobbied Congress in 1956. Congress said, all right, territory of Alaska, we're going to pass the Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act. We're going to give you 1 million acres, and we're going to pass off management and care of individuals that had mental health issues to you. you're required to use these 1 million acres to maximize revenue and to use that revenue exclusively to treat these specific beneficiary groups. So that happened in 1956. The state formed, a few years later. In the 70s, the state legislature said, we're just going to treat mental health trust land like it's general state land, and we're going to fund mental health programs. And that happened, and it went on for a couple decades. And then in the 80s, there was a class action lawsuit against the state of Alaska because there were beneficiaries and beneficiary groups that felt like they were underserved and they weren't getting the care that they felt they were due through the state. And that it went all the way to the state Supreme Court. There was a judgment issued against the state, and the state was required to reconstitute the trust to the original 1 million acres and pay the trust a sum of money. It was about $200 million to compensate the trust for the encumbrances that were on the original mental health trust land from 1956. And so that happened in the 80s. It took about 10 years for the settlement agreement to be worked out. And so in the mid 90s, 96, 1994, I think actually was when it was officially done. That agreement was finalized, the settlement agreement, and the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority was created to act as the state corporation that managed the trust. And our office, the Trust Land Office, was created to manage all of the trust's land and non-cash assets. So we manage about 1 million acres. The trust, like I said, it was reconstituted. There was about half of the original land entitlement, the original grant left that the state hadn't given away through municipal entitlements or land sales or those kinds of things. And sorry, my notes froze here. And so in 96, like I said, the trust was reconstituted. It was given an additional 500,000 acres to bring it back to the original 1 million and that settlement amount. So what does that mean? Like I said, the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority is a state corporation. It is a perpetual trust. It exists to improve the lives of its beneficiaries. The beneficiary groups were outlined in the original Alaska Mental Health Enabling Act, and it's some of the most vulnerable Alaskans. They're any Alaskan that experiences mental illness, substance misuse, intellectual or developmental disabilities, Alzheimer's and related dementia, or traumatic brain injury would fall into a category of a beneficiary of the trust. And it's governed by a 7-member board of trustees that are appointed by the governor and approved by the legislature for 5-year terms. The other thing that's unique to the trust is we're fully self-funded. We receive no general funds whatsoever. We actually give money back to the general fund or the state to fund some programs that benefit the individuals that would fall into those beneficiary groups. We give the money to Department of Health and University of Alaska for educational programs. But if you follow the state's budget process, you'll see the mental health budget, it's its own budget, and the legislature is just providing the receipt authority for that budget. The only way mental health funds can be expended is through the approval of the board of trustees. So it's an entirely separate pot of money. The trust itself, the cash assets are managed as a small subset of the permanent fund. And there's some reserves that are managed by the Department of Revenue as well. So the trust authority, the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority, they engage in grant making and advocacy. They're around trying to change the system and improve how the continuum of care for beneficiaries and how they respond to the challenges that are faced by the beneficiaries. So they have several focus areas. In addition, So the disability justice is one, housing and home and community-based services is another, beneficiary employment and engagement, mental health and addiction intervention, and workforce development and early childhood intervention and prevention. So I apologize for just reading those, but that's the program side of things. Like I said, I'm at the Trust Land Office. We're the development side of the house, but the trust is, like I said, it's a grant maker. It gives out about 20 million or more in grants every year to organizations across the state. And those grants provide a variety of direct services, equipment purchases, capacity building, planning efforts, outreach, training, kind of all across the board. The Trust Authority accepts grant applications year round and is always looking for and hoping to partner with new organizations so that serve those beneficiary groups and aligns with the Trust mission. All that information is available on the Trust website if anyone's interested or you know anyone that is. They do give out mini grants too on an individual basis as well for that's a smaller amount, but all that information is on the website. So I would definitely encourage y'all, if you have anyone in your community or organizations in your community that might be able to partner with the Trust, that they were always looking for that. And I do want to highlight a couple recent grants. In Petersburg, there was a award to Working Against Violence for Everyone, or WAVE. That was to support facility renovation. It was a little over $35,000. And then there was one back in 2020 to the Petersburg Mental Health Services for support of Trust beneficiaries during the pandemic. So we also support organizations that operate statewide to support our beneficiaries. So there's a lot of regional partners down here in Southeast, Juneau Reentry Coalition, the National Association on Mental Illness, in Juneau, Southeast Alaska Independent Living Association, Bartlett Hospital there in Juneau. So, and then before I turn it over to Chandler, I just would want to reiterate that the Trust Land Office does have an obligation and a fiduciary responsibility by law to maximize revenue generation from the lands exclusively in the best interest of the trust and its beneficiaries. So that's the angle that we come at things on, and that's like I said, we're a very unique organization, a unique landowner to the country, and we do try to do our best to work productively as much as possible with communities and projects whenever we're working all across the state. And we certainly look forward to working that productively with you all on the South Midcoff subdivision, and hopefully more projects in your community too. I mean, we do seek opportunities for revenue generation that align with the public interest, but again, it is our fiduciary responsibility to always be to the trust and its beneficiaries. So that's kind of the overview. Hopefully it wasn't too quick, but I guess if anybody has any general questions about the trust or the Trust Land Office or anything like that right now might be a good time for that before we move into the specifics about the subdivision. And if not, that's okay too.
Do you have any questions?
I guess more for curiosity.
Yeah.
So you were given a million acres to begin with, and then with the state's wrangling, 500 were taken away, and then an additional 500, still keeping you at a million. How many acres do you have left?
So since 1994, I think that the trust has disposed of about 2.4% of its land acreage. So pretty close to that million. Yeah, almost a million still. And I should clarify, when you think of the land grant, it wasn't all fee estate. It wasn't all surface and subsurface. So the trust owns some split estate. So we do own fee estate. I believe it's on around 600,000 of those acres. And then the other 400,000, it's just a subsurface estate. So like oil and gas or locatable minerals, that kind of thing. And
In your, through that settlement, if I remember back, you came back when the state did the land selections from the federal government. then some of those land selections came back to the mental health trust. Do you have any idea what of, in this area, what resulted
Are you, so I
in
think
southeast here?
yeah, I think I understand your question. Are you kind of asking like how much of the land down here was original mental health trust land?
Yeah,
versus
and then,
replacement
and
land?
then what increased through those, through the negotiations? Because I was involved originally with some of those negotiations on the federal side.
Oh, okay. I don't know off the top of my head, what percentage of the land down in Petersburg specifically is original mental health trust land versus replacement land. So when I say original, I mean that was part of the original grant that the trust was given in 1956, versus land that was given as replacement, that 500,000 acres of replacement land. Yeah.
South Mitkoff subdivision is original trust land. So,
Thank you.
and I think it's about 250,000 acres across southeast. Just to give you an idea of the different, how much we have in each region of the state, but I don't know, yeah, the particulars of what was replacement lands versus original in each.
Got back from Juneau a couple of weeks ago, and we had a meeting with our Senator Stedman. And he mentioned that he's working with the trust on some ideas. That's something you guys are prepared to talk about, or are you involved in that? I mean, he didn't really say who he was talking to. He just said he was talking to the trust.
Yeah, sure. We have had a few conversations. I don't have any specific information, and I don't think we could probably talk about it either way, even if I did, until that, some sort of formal thing came about. But yeah,
Throwing out ideas that at least for those of us that were there, sounded like they might work. Tax abatement type conversations to help fund some of the things that we're concerned about. So it wasn't. Anyway, if it comes to your desk at some point, remember, I mean, the mayor and a couple of us were in the meeting with Stedman, and it sounded like some interesting ideas.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will certainly pass that along. Like I said, I don't want to pass the buck here, but I'm the deputy director, not the executive director. And so I'm not in,
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was just.
No,
one
no,
of those,
you're okay, Steve.
We
Yeah.
were there.
Yeah.
And it's like, he started asking us questions about it and we're going, yeah, that sounds like that would be a good idea. It would
Yeah.
work.
No, that's great to hear. And yeah, I look forward to talking more with him.
Jumping in, and we've got our utility director back behind you, so Carl and our community development director, Liz. So if I start misspeaking for the assembly, you guys need to correct me, but I think the biggest concern is what we have seen in the past with developments, not just the trust, but others, that when they don't put the road access in and the utility corridors in, that the lots have a hard time selling, or if they do sell, what we see happening is people buy them, don't really know what they're buying. Shame on them, and that's, and then they come to the borough and say, you need to fix this. And it's really hard to fix a subdivision after the fact. Carl and Liz, I mean, do you have anything to?
Yeah, feel free to interject.
Yeah, but I was trying to encourage them. They're the experts actually on our part.
Yeah, hi, Carl Hagerman, Utility Director. And I'd just like to say that, what Steve said is correct. I don't know how many times I've had people come into my office and say, hey, I bought this lot from the state of Alaska, World Mental Health Land Trust. I don't have a road, I don't have utilities. When are you gonna put them in? And so it's a hard discussion to have. It's that they bought this land and they have to now handle the development of that land. And it just puts us in a bad situation here at the borough. And so I don't know if that can be addressed by how you go about selling this property. I guess one of the biggest questions that I have for you all is when you do these land sales, have you ever developed the subdivision fully with utilities and access before selling the land to see what you can get as far as profits? You know, as you said, that your responsibility, that is your responsibility.
Carl, Liz, would it be easier if you're gonna be, in the conversation to move up here? And then we're facing one another? Then one of you could take my spot and. That way they don't have to turn around if they're, answering questions and so forth.
Sorry about that. We weren't thinking when we set the room up.
That makes sense that the people that know most of the details would be involved in the conversation, so.
Well, yeah, I can go ahead and answer your question, Carl, the best I can. So typically, no, we generally don't build the roads or or install the utilities. It's definitely an additional risk, right, to the trust. And as I mentioned before, the trust is entirely self-funded. So the trustees, any dollar that they give the trust land office to use in development, which we would be spending the trust money to do that development. And there's a specific way, well, I'm not going to get into how the trust organizes their finances, but they're not giving that money to a beneficiary or a beneficiary serving group. So that's definitely something that they have to weigh. And we, like I said, we have not built roads to, borough or city standards where they're to like residential collector or anything like that, because it is a cost, right? And usually,
Very, very large cost.
Ex-
And that's why
exactly.
it's the problem for us.
yeah. So that's that's just a risk that we typically do not take on for that reason. I mean,
One of the things. It also poses a emergency services issue for us. When roads are not built in and built to standards, and then people go in there, and it becomes fire and EMS service in those places. So anyway, I'm sorry, Liz, I know I cut you off. I didn't.
Just gonna add, I have probably before or after they visit Carl, they visit me. And, what I get is, I'd like to buy this property, but there's no road to it. And I say, yeah, well, we're not, as the borough, going to construct that road for you. You're gonna have to construct it. And then the next question is, why would I do that? Because everybody, between me and the main road is now gonna get the road for free that I had to pay for. And then they move on to some other piece of property. So I think for us, it certainly hinders people buying property and developing it. And I'm assuming that since you're the seller, it's hindering people from buying your property, because the cost that they have to put in to develop the road, they're no longer going to be able to build a house or a pad or anything else. And then everybody else that comes behind them is basically going to get a free ride on that road. And that's, for most people, not a winning proposition, right? Especially when you're right on the highway, So,
Jeff, I understand that you've used some different mechanisms in a couple of subdivisions or areas up around Wasilla, where you've put covenants or something on the roads or requiring roads. Can you give us some details I know on at least one or maybe two of them you've done up in that area, where there's different type of provisions because it was closer to town or some other, I don't remember the circumstances or don't know the circumstances that you've done that would help, that it might help?
So in the past,
Yeah.
so we have to separate things here. There's Division of Mining Land and Water, developing state land, which we're familiar with. There are a couple developments out, what's it, Frederick Drive, out that way?
Point East,
Wait. Okay, so this is trust land, and through unorganized borough planning, they are a private entity, separate from state land. So what some of the state subdivisions used to do was start a homeowners association, probably with the hope that enough of the people buying these lots would pool their money and have, make a, like a service area or chip in on a truckload of gravel. Didn't always necessarily happen that way. But as you are well aware, there is no requirement through AS 4015 for road development. What you're also probably familiar with down here is when the Division of Mining and Land and Water issued patents. There are also easements, aside from section line easements, that were reserved in the patents. So you do have a lot of easements in the area that originated with the state. From a plating point of view, there are no engineering standards. Our cutoff is 50 feet in width. If there's anything less than that, I do require comments from local emergency response. In some of this area, there are some of those existing 50-foot easements. So in couple of these, in the southern end of the subdivision, there's actually 100-foot wide easement that can be used and so they also create, this is to create an access and utility easement combined with the intent, we hope, that the utilities would be developed along the exterior of the easement. But once again, that's beyond the scope of the planning authority.
But there's nothing that would prevent you then for putting or documenting on your plats an easement corridor for power or other things, is that what I'm hearing?
We can, if the owner wishes to have a separate utility easement, it's up to the owner. I have lots of subdivisions that come through my office where they are combined utility and access easements, and some that we have an access and separate utility easement. So there's no hard rule. And kind of to answer your question earlier, it's about 10,000 acres that they received here in the Petersburg area that were original mental health lands.
Thank you.
So yeah, just to clarify, I don't think there were any subdivisions in the Matsu that the trust land office or the mental health trust has done that on, to my knowledge. Yeah. But I think those were all state subdivisions.
Well, and recently, the borough has required like pioneer roads in some areas. So, the subdivision folks have had to put in pioneer roads, which greatly, normally you think of a state lot, you can pick it up for like dirt cheap, but these are not. Once you add the cost of even the pioneer road in.
Yeah, as you well know, our situation here with Muskie is a little bit different, and particularly out in this area. Yeah, we have, floating roads here.
Explain the term pioneer roads, please.
I think it was just a gravel road that had to be put in. Yeah, not a complete, asphalt with curb and gutter, nothing like that.
That'd be nice.
Might be similar to a logging road.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good way to
that's
describe it,
what I
Mark.
picture
It's
a
like a
pioneer road.
resource grade road, kind of. It's not nearly as wide usually.
Single lane.
Yeah. If it's all right, I think maybe it would make the most sense now for Chandler to talk about the response to your letter and some of our.
Our letter,
Yeah,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
letter, sorry,
yeah.
the borough's letter. Does that work?
yeah. That's fine.
Okay.
All right, hopefully I will answer some questions before the questions come up in this, and then, we can also dialogue back and forth and get better detail and clarify points. And I think we've done a good job kind of delineating the state subdivisions versus the trust subdivisions, so. So first, I just want to thank you all for being here and making the time for this. I know this took many sessions to coordinate and get all of us together, so yay, we're here, and it's a beautiful sunny day. The South Mitkoff subdivision has been in progress for over 5 years. Before I was the project manager, my predecessor was coming down to Petersburg seasonally, working on various trust things, the Papkeys and all other subdivisions, and realized that there was a interest from locals to develop South Mitkoff. And I think in 2018, he started working on design with some locals. And so I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge that there has been some Petersburg residents that have had a seat at the table in developing this or designing this subdivision. However, I'm not certain on what the coordination with the borough looked like at that time or through those years. And that's certainly different than if we were to start a project today, it would probably look different and start at the beginning in these coordination meetings. So, also like to just take a moment to introduce myself and who I am and what I'm bringing in here. As we mentioned, we work at the Trust Land Office. I work out of the Ketchikan office, where I am a 5th generation local. And so, coming to Petersburg and other small communities, I'm responsible for the development of Southeast Alaska on trust lands. And it's been evident since I moved home in COVID that our small towns are quickly changing, right? And there's a pretty quickly changing landscape going on. So my personal hope is that Southeast Alaska is an affordable place to live, because I have 2 kids that I hope get to have affordable access to housing when they grow up so they don't move away from me, right? And so I am keenly aware that tourism's been around my whole life, but as we watch our small communities increasingly become seasonal communities, because we're getting outcompeted from the local interest in the few housing units available. So before I start my comments, I just wanted to say thank you, because your letter showed a deep care and concern for your community and for the development of your community going forward. And that's awesome. So the Alaska Mental Health Trust has a really unique privilege because most of our land assets are within communities, whereas a lot of other stuff is in much more rural areas. You have to think about back in 1956, what lands were surveyed. Surveyors hadn't been everywhere in Alaska back then. It was in communities. And so we work a lot in communities, and we develop land in communities, right, for improving the lives and circumstances of mental health trust beneficiaries. So we are on the land development side, and we get to share in that beautiful mission. But our work also has an economic impact on these communities. And so we acknowledge that in what we do. COVID taught us all how small and frail our little systems are when one tire supply goes down or one small business, and the cascade of impacts. And so it's really interesting here at the TLO, because when we open up lands, we do open them up for new enterprise and new business, as well as new housing units. All right, thank you for bearing with me. So back to the letter. It's taken us a few months to get here, but in September of 23, the Assembly voted down the mayor accepting the public access and utility easements to be dedicated by the plat. I have to say that phrase several times. So I'm going to try to go slowly. I say public access and utility easements dedicated by the plat. What this means is that the borough didn't vote down the subdivision. It voted down, right, the mayor accepting those road and utility corridors that we're talking about. And so I wanted to focus my response to you guys just on those road and utility corridors to help understand what those actually are within the subdivision, and what they intend to do. So I did some super rough math, and there's roughly about 64 acres or about 10 miles of Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority lands that are proposed to be dedicated as public access road and utility corridors. Those would be 50-foot wide, and provide access for building roads and for installing utilities. And if those were dedicated by the subdivision, those road builders or utility installers would not need further approval or payment to the TLO for building those corridors. Those would be for the public. These corridors are already designed into this plat when you move to the other sheets. And they access every single lot in the subdivision, and they also access many privately owned lots that are around here that currently do not have legal access or access to power in those lots. There are, I think, 10, maybe 9 locations where these road corridors would go off the main Mitkoff Highway and then enter this subdivision. This subdivision is roughly 3 miles long, you know, on the water side of the Mitkoff Highway, extending down to the water. These corridors all connect, so then it creates not only a primary access into these lots, but they'll connect around into a secondary access. So if something were to be blocked, there would always be a primary and secondary ingress and egress for each lot within the subdivision. Also, my understanding, I think 2 of these corridors are already constructed and developed, and we just put that right away where somebody else, or where that road was already built. So in your September letter, kind of, it seemed to me that the core reasons for denying the vote for mayoral acceptance of the public access and utility dedications was because of not building a core central access or requiring a homeowners association. And we kind of heard some comments on that already. So as I already stated, the South Mitkoff subdivision doesn't really have one core access. It's a very large subdivision. And so building out one road would not facilitate access to all the lots because there's 10 different access points. Further, as lightly touched on, the public access and utility easements are not required to be built by the state of Alaska plating. And that the plat as is does conform to all legal requirements for plating. That last piece is kind of important to understand because your request to build roads, kind of as Jeff touched on over here, is tough because we must maximize revenue generation, right? Legally, we must do that. And so the TLO can't actually take an action to invest in building a road. It's not a requirement if that return on investment isn't guaranteed to be greater than just selling them as is. That makes sense. Okay, so the next point I want to make is about the homeowners association or the request for a homeowners association or some other binding agreement that would essentially require the future lot purchasers to pay for the building of roads or for the servicing of those roads, plowing, emergency services. I'm going to try to explain that a little bit. It gets a little complicated, so bear with me.
So it's not feasible for the trust to build these roads, but you're feeling that it's feasible for potential owners to do it. Why is that any different? Too expensive for the trust, then it's gonna be too expensive for the buyers, therefore they won't sell.
Maybe the difference between not being too expensive, but getting that return on investment.
So
Because
trust
we
has
have
a return on the, an ROI number that you have to meet. In other words, you have to make 10% or 15% or 20% or some number like that.
less a number, but more like, can I make more money selling it like this or like this? With a road or without a road?
That was, I think, that was the question, it was either Carl or Liz asked, which is, have you ever done it where you've put the roads in?
Right, and we haven't. Well, there's a reason most developers haven't in Alaska's history, right? And so we're evaluating that and looking forward because there's a lot of boroughs that do require roads. And so we're evaluating that as an organization to determine if we can engage in those boroughs or not. You know, it's, what are we, 27 years old, I think, as an organization? And we're looking to get more sophisticated. And it's kind of just a natural product of time, I think. So I guess to further answer your question though, you know, when we originally planned to put some South Metcalf lots in our September, in our fall land sale, right? And we didn't do that this year. We originally planned to put those lots in as blocks. So you could see as like one main corridor accessing several lots, sell lots collectively in one corridor. That way those purchasers could choose if they wanted to organize and install one road. Because it's like Liz said, often and in the past, right, it's usually one person puts in a road to their lot. Other people get the benefit of that and not necessarily everyone puts in for that benefit. And that's happened, you know, time immemorial, right, of the development of lands. Right. Or there is a very slow development that happens too. So, you know, that was our initial strategy, was to just try to make this available. It gets complicated though, because we've had requests from people that have been quite clear that they're not interested in that form of development, and that's why they want to purchase lots at South Metcalf. And so we have that side that we have to cater to, because we're looking to have as open market as possible, right? We're trying to get the maximum return, so we're not trying to exclude anyone from their interest in our subdivision. And that's kind of the complicated thing with CCNRs, or excuse me, they're called covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And that's CCNRs, that's kind of the bigger overarching term for a homeowners association. So CCNRs, right, kind of tell people to have maybe a certain aesthetic in their neighborhood, or maybe some don'ts, no blue tarps, or they also organize people for collective services like plowing and road maintenance and things like that. And CCNRs either come with the homeowners association and that's with a board, right, of lot owners they have a board. Or CSNRs come without, and they just come with deed restrictions, just rules on the deed when you buy the property of what you have to do or don't do. As a land management organization with a very small staff, we would be responsible for an HOA until enough of those lots sold and enough people volunteered to become an HOA and be on a board, until that was self-governing, which development can be slow, right? With our very small staff, it's really not in our business to be property managers, and we never have been in the past. So that is certainly a high-risk decision point. So I guess thinking about the homeowners association and the services, the road services, we've learned, again, that just not all lot purchasers that are interested in these lots are interested in all of those things, and that's why they want to live and are waiting and not waiting very patiently, because they email me all the time asking about this subdivision. And so imposing CCNRs or an HOA could really reduce the market interest from locals in our subdivision. Okay, there was only a couple more items I think that were big in the letter. Correct me if I'm missing something. I think there was a lot of discussion in there about leach field requirements for septic systems. And then road names, because like I said, there's 10 miles of road to be dedicated in the subdivision. So first, our survey contractor did reach out to the borough. And back in June of last year of 2023, the borough responded that they chose not to name the roads because it was out of service area 1. So we can name roads, that's fine. We can offer that to the community. It's whichever on that. And then for the wastewater, I did call DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, just to check in and see if we were missing anything because, you know, Amy will share all the plating requirements and it's not a plating requirement. But I did check in with the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation wastewater program, and they don't regulate lot sizes. There's no minimum lot size for a septic system. Turns out septic systems come in all shapes and sizes, and so does Alaska. And they really can't regulate, you know, some type of size that's going to fit all the unique topography across Alaska as a state. With that said, if you do look at this subdivision plat, most of those lots are over 5 acres, and that's well within the ample space requirements for common septic systems. And so septic isn't something that's regulated in the subdivision development process. It's really something that's regulated by DEC when a developer's actually going in to install. There are certain requirements DEC has from water systems, you know, has to be so far from a moving stream. But again, that would be the entity developing the property that would be having to abide by those DEC regulations.
Buyer beware. Make sure your lot's big enough if you want to put a home on it and put a septic system on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or you're not below us, another person who has one above is gonna run down on your lot.
Yeah.
Which are a number of those,
Train and
yes.
even water.
Mm-hmm.
Up and close and personal with what's happening on your lot.
And that is kind of a nice thing about these lots because they're so large. You know, you don't have those 30-acre lots where, and then you've got that terrain, that steep terrain, and you get to smell your neighbor at certain times of year. There's a lot of opportunity for private enterprise, for future subdivisions, you know, density if Petersburg were to grow, because they are such large lots. I think they're averaging 5 to 7 acres across the board. So.
Consideration over soil type. I mean, we're talking about septic systems in that area. Muskeg is not a soil that you can actually just install a septic system in. You have to remove it and put in gravel, rock, that kind of thing to be your leach field. And that creates an issue. It's good that the lots are large, but you're gonna use a certain portion of that and basically another large cost to excavate that muskeg, put it someplace, get rid of it someplace, and then replace that with fill so that you can have your septic system. And the larger lots, like you mentioned, that could house a future subdivision in themselves. That's an even bigger leach field and septic system to take care of that. Do soils come into play when you're looking at lot sizes and planning these subdivisions out?
These are really questions for DEC. I mean, that's, you know, kind of a technical question, but I did speak with a DEC engineer who was really excited actually about all these kind of new science coming on board for septic systems out there. He's like, there's a tank for every situation out there today. You know, there's a lot of new things coming on board versus just the conventional, you know, D1 putting in some nice gravels and having that gravel bed. And that's also a business too, right? I can't speak.
Build lots that have a problem, and then those folks are calling around going, we can't find anybody to do this for us. Call, similar to what you've heard earlier, is the borough becomes the contractor. We have to go out and build a road. We have to go out and put utilities in. We have to go out and pump out a septic system that's collapsed because it's not made for what. Anyway, I mean, what we're trying, I mean, I can't speak for the assembly. What's going on is you build these subdivisions, clearly your focus is not on your buyer, it's on selling them for the profit of the trust. Totally get it, I understand. We have to service it on the back end, and there's costs associated with that. And this kind of development doesn't return costs very well, because the land developed this way isn't worth very much. So it's hard for us to get a return to say, hey, we're gonna get out there and plow roads, or get out there and make improvements, or truck out there, a Vector truck that's really large and can't just go down a goat trail to try to help somebody out. And these people that move in here, they're our new neighbors. You talked about being from the Southeast and being 5th generation. What are we gonna tell them? No, we can't help you. Go talk to mental health trust. You know, that doesn't happen. So, I mean,
I agree with you. And I acknowledge that we are not necessarily developers in that capacity. We're a landowner, right? That cuts up our land and sells it as one of our major programs in our business plan. But to the extent of developing the land, putting in roads or streetlights or pads or septics,
spent a better part of several hours this morning talking about 2 subdivisions and rules related to those. And, you know, the assembly's going through a lot of that, which is, do we want development that's less than, you know, some way, clearly, but I mean,
Yep.
that's a big part of this, I think, why the assembly wrote these letters. And I shouldn't be speaking as much of this.
Yep, I'll jump in and I live out that way, so I can speak about some parts of that. But if that's sold, then we have, those costs fall on to that manager's talking about, falls on to all our local people here who are paying for something on which they got no benefit from. And I think that, from my perspective, I think that's wrong. Is that I agree with putting them on a tax roll, and I totally agree that I'd really like to see, you know, some development out there. I have no disagreement with that. What I have a problem with is the fact that all these costs now are being transferred to the people, the rest of the people in our borough, and these people benefit here from them because what they're paying in taxes doesn't even begin to cover what the costs are going to be, in my opinion. And that's kind of where I come from. And I guess the other part of that, is there any way we can work with you? You know, we'd like to see it developed, and I know this is, and I hate the word out of the box, but is there any other way we can help put that together that might, you know, that would be acceptable to us, and then also allow you to sell those lots? My understanding is from somebody out that area, they've already given you a proposal that they would build the roads. And I think they had a cost estimate in there that by doing that, you would gain better benefits out of it. Whether that's true or not, what the individual told me, but at any rate, whatever we could do to help alleviate some of our concerns, I think that's where we're at.
Mental health is, you know, you're tasked with generating the most revenue you can for the property you're selling. It's, you know, in some cases, it seems to me like you'd get more money per lot if you actually had access to them. But you're not in the development business. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know if that's what Bob's talking about or not, you know?
Yeah, it is. And yeah, if there's any way we could, you know, get to some kind of an agreement on that, And maybe it's just one part at a time, because that is, as you say, that's a big subdivision. And I'm off the top of my head, that would take us some sitting down, and I think I have total confidence in our staff to be able to help work out, the details on this. If we could do something, that would benefit, and we could, you could benefit from selling us, and we could benefit from the revenues we get off of them, back into our treasury, so to speak.
Up to being in, outside of service area one, 4 mils is what the people pay on taxes, and that's, we have, required by the state for paying for education. So that, these lots, I can't see being worth a lot of money assessment wise, so I don't know how much we would generate in, taxes.
Depends on when if they sell. I mean, that's always,
That's true.
as
Yeah.
long as they're in the hands of mental health, there's no taxes collected.
Right.
on them, once they're sold. And as we talked about, I mean, we don't have our fire, EMS person here. But the first time they have to respond to a fire out there and run into a bad road or no road, that's the next thing on the list. Well, we need to budget to go cut a road so we can get a fire truck down to them or an ambulance or whatever. I mean, and that's how it, can we say no? You bet we could. We could just say, I'm sorry, you don't have access. We're not gonna, but that's not really the southeast way. And invariably what happens is the borough ends up having to pick up the cost of, so the trust is doing what you need to do. I totally get that. Again, I'm not arguing that. But what you're doing is in a sense, it's not really super transparent because there's a bunch of other costs that aren't being included in what you're doing that gets moved over to the borough. I mean, Carl, Liz, am I misstating any of this?
Just had a question. So, I mean, is there anything that would preclude the trust from doing a test case, developing, putting a road in a cul-de-sac into one of these 20-acre lots and seeing what you could make on that 20-acre lot in comparison to what you would have made on it, as a single lot, carve it up, basically. And put a road in.
And in, to add to what Carl's asking, and put those costs onto lot costs.
So, Senator Stedman had some ideas. I mean, he talked about tax abatement and, would the borough be willing to property tax to help fund that? And, I think the group that was at least talking to him, subject to assembly approval, we're like, yeah, I mean, that's to our benefit. So I think there is conversations. I just don't know how far that's gone.
Yeah, and I would say I hear all of your points and your concerns, and I can follow your logic, and but to your question about a test case, there's nothing that would preclude it. It would just be something that we would have to evaluate and take before our board and see if they were open to that idea of doing something like that. Because again, that amount of money, isn't something that we can just spend out of our operating budget that we have for the trust land office. It would be something that would require additional approval, and we can definitely look into evaluating a proposal like that and whether or not we would want to take it to the board. So it's an option.
It seems that, with a little more due diligence on the land trust part, that you might be able to increase land values, as the mayor said, and actually make more, and not the entire subdivision, but parts of it. You mentioned that some people are not interested in a road, and that's great, I guess. Most people want a road, to access their property, and are happy to punch in a driveway that's maybe 50 feet long to get to a building site instead of 500,000-600,000 feet long, that other people are gonna use.
The Frederick Point Road is a prime example. There was a land lottery, and I don't know exactly where the land came from, if it was mental health or state, but they accessed their homes by skiff. And then we built a water dam reservoir out there. So there was a road. Next thing, you know, they wanted power and, you know, so they kind of liked the idea of a road. So, I think it would raise property values, but yeah, yeah, we'll be a test case.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that, you know, this idea of a test case, I think that would be something that we would need to work very closely together on, you know, as organizations and as entities, because we can't, I mean, at this point, right, we don't have a recorded subdivision, and so we've got nothing to sell. And so we'll be asking for money to build something that doesn't exist, and that we have no guarantee on getting existing to sell those lots and recoup that cost. So that was something that we would need to understand the expectations well before engaging in any type of analysis for evaluating that.
So we need to sign the letter. No.
We just need to work together.
Yeah. I think, you know, it'd be interesting to have a conversation with Bert and see exactly what he was trying to do, because it's obviously something new. You know, and, you know, he's a firm.
There are a couple of those tracks there that I think would sell with a road in, would sell at a much higher cost because they have access to the main road. And since we have housing, you know, we have a housing problem too in Petersburg, which we've been trying to solve. I think with a road there, the value of those would sell really quick. There's off that you could return your investment really quick on it. And I totally agree with looking at the aspects that the manager's talking about too. But if you want a test case, there is a couple of those, I think that Liz and Carl could pick out that would really be good, you know, really, I think would make good test cases for you.
Hi, right now, I know we're talking about, trust land office, but again, with the Division of Mining, Land and Water, we also have state land that we do subdivisions for. And right now, in front of the legislature, we have a bill, that looks to have, commercial development for land sales. And what we are envisioning with that is developers coming in and buying large blocks of land and being able then to come in and develop it and turn around and then sell that. So currently, the Division of Mining, Land and Water, and again, I'm not talking about trust land offices. I'm talking just about general state lands that we have. We have SB 199, and its companion bill is HB 282. That's currently in front of the legislature, and it is for land sales, land disposal, and it has a commercial component to it, so that an entity, a commercial developer could come in and buy something other than just say a 5-acre parcel or 10-acre parcel or 20-acre parcel. They could buy 160 acres or 180 acres or 320 and then develop it, put in the roads, turn it around and flip it and sell it. So that is something that is currently in front of the legislature right now for general state lands.
So if those lands are outside of a municipal planning authority, is the state going to adopt development standards for those sales? Or is it the same development standards you have now, which are no required development standards?
So again, it would depend on if it is in an organized borough or if it's in the unorganized borough.
So if it's in the unorganized borough, there would be no development required.
We would look to that. Again, we would look at what interests of that land sale and putting in those types of requirements for developer. Because we do have other subdivisions that are outside of, in the unorganized borough. And being not only the plating authority, we also have zoning powers as well, that we could come up with regulations for development and for certain standards, for a minimum standards.
You could require roads, for instance, for
Yes,
these. Yeah.
if that is something that we're looking to do, if a lot of the land is outside in the unorganized borough, and us as the plating and zoning authority, we would look to potentially develop those types of regulations. No, we do not.
And it would be more case by case than a standard, some minimum standard.
It depends on how, how fast this would take off, and in terms of the interest for subdivisions like this.
So you're talking state-owned, not mental
Yeah.
health-owned land.
Correct. Sorry, but yes, we are.
We ever get our entitlement, there will be not much state land right in our borough anyhow.
Just to, not to get super technical, but one thing that I noticed in your plat and is sort of been the bane of our existence, Chandler, for the last few weeks is section line easements. Yay, everybody's favorite topic. But I don't want to like, I don't want to necessarily delve into it, but I would just want to make the point that it would be nice if the plat would just say whether the section line easement existed for real, how wide it was, and whether it was going to be, if it was bigger than what you're showing for the access easement, whether that extra was going to be vacated, or and is this now the new easement? Because as Chandler knows, we had this very complicated issue not too long ago, and I can see where we're going to recreate that issue potentially again. And all I ask is that some clarity for us and for the future property owner on section line easements would be really fabulous.
So, we have done in the property a little bit further to the north, there was a section line easement determination done. I did section line easement determination when I reviewed the subdivision. It's a little complicated. I mean, it's a lot. This is actually really complicated. Most of us are familiar with on state land, there is a section line 50 feet each side of the section line. So 100 feet in most cases on each side of the section line total. This is original mental health trust land. So there are additional considerations. So a little bit of a history lesson. So as you know, this area was made part of the Tongass National Forest in 1909, and it was closed to settlement. There were communities that were identified in the executive orders. Petersburg was one of them. You had your town site survey and your town site. Happened all up and down the southeast. But outside of your town site, which is kind of interesting, is there was actually a rectangular survey done for this area. So Petersburg, Gustavus, and Haynes are the only areas in southeast that I can name off the top of my head that were actually surveyed at the rectangular system in the 20s. There might have been little pockets here and there, but these were fairly large as you are aware around here, large areas that were surveyed. So that was done in the 20s, I think, maybe the early 30s. However, the area was still part of Tongass National Forest, so there was a reservation for that. Even with the legislation in 1923 that allowed for 66-foot section line easements, 33 feet each side of the section line, because this area was under a withdrawal, no section line easements attached. Okay, keep that in mind. There are no section line easements around here. Then we moved on to, so this area, we'll skip that other stuff. So in 1952, there was PLO 842, which listed all the townships and sections in this area, along with many others in Southeast. And was actually, this area was actually eliminated from the Tongass National Forest. However, in the same public land order, the area was set aside, it was withdrawn again for classification. So once again, there was no chance for section line easement to attach. Then we moved on to 1956, the Mental Health Trust Enabling Act was passed. And then in 1961, this area in PLO 2386, the state was given a preference right to select these lands, and it listed all the townships and sections here in the Petersburg area, where the state was allowed to select these lands under the Mental Health Enabling Act, which of course they did. In order for lands to be selected under the Mental Health Enabling Act, they had to be surveyed, unappropriated, and unreserved. So this is where it gets kind of quirky in that the land here was still reserved, but the state was allowed to select it. So in my view, there was still a reservation, and therefore no section line easements could attach to the section lines. Jump ahead, in 63, the land was patented to the state. Division of Mining Land and Water, or the Division of Lands at the time, started conveying lands along here, mostly along the coastline and some of the aliquot parts and government lots, mostly. And within those patents were reservations for 50-foot section line easements and just general access and utility easements, depending on where along the coast it is. And I'm sorry, this is mining land and water thing. You have to read each patent to see what was reserved in all of them. So, yeah, sorry. That's what we do. So the state, and so it was kind of assumed there was a 50-foot section line easement. However, there was then the court case. This area was original trust lands, so it was conveyed immediately to the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority, this area. What was left of it, what the state hadn't already conveyed into private hands. So it wasn't until a few years ago that with their starting to develop lands more, that we needed a concurrence document over section line easements. So basically with original trust lands, you had to do the research to see whether there was some sort of reservation that precluded section line easements, the 33-foot each side of the section line, from attaching when the land was selected. Otherwise, if it was replacement lands, they weren't going to honor new section line easements. But if it already had been transferred, like as I was saying, there's a lot of patents that have already been issued. Those section line easements still exist as 50-foot section line easements, and the only way to vacate them is to petition the state. But in this area that's being developed, that was kind of the question area, and we pretty much have concluded, due to these public land orders, at the time the state selected the lands, no 33-foot section line easement did attach. So where there should be a section line easement, or we would think there would be one, the trust has provided the 50-foot access and utility easement.
So then on the general notes of your plat, you're going to specify that they're,
Yeah, we can get that updated, yeah.
yeah, okay. I was gonna say, sorry I asked, but
Yeah, and
But,
I'm
you
sure,
know,
yeah,
me
I'm
and
sure
Dave
everybody in this
Tinas-
room is sorry they
Dave
asked.
Tinas and I are probably the only ones who were like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, got it.
And like I said, it is really confusing and especially with trust lands and university lands too, so.
Sorry, that took a lot of time.
No,
Questions? Well done.
So looking at this draft, I think I am 1 or 2 away from you. So you've got the government lots, which I'm assuming is the state land. And then you've got the other lots, which I think would fall under the mental health umbrella. So is this,
Most of those government lots have already been conveyed. Most of them were conveyed by the Division of Mining, Land and Water prior to the court case in 94.
so conveyed to the borough?
No, the private property. The borough got it some of this area, but, down here in the south end of the development, it mostly was private. I think the trust has a few lots left, but for the most part, the division took the easy way out, and coastal access, those were the first lots to go. Those government lots, yes.
So I didn't know if the state was actively trying to sell the ones that are still left. They're not. Okay,
They're
don't
pretty
worry
much
about it.
all in private
Okay,
property unless they're still owned by the trust land office.
follow-up question to that, and I guess that's first to Carl, is that in the easements that are in the plat itself, is there sufficient width and the number that we need for power if we were to provide it at some point in time?
Sure, yeah, yes. The trick with that is that we need a platform from which to build the.
Yes, well aware.
And so a
The road.
50-foot wide easement provides enough space to put a road wide enough to build power line from. But still, we don't have that road until it gets built.
So these lots would be basically powerless unless they had their own source of providing it.
Until somebody punches in
A road.
the road, or a driveway, and in this, the conditions on the plat mention something about no access to the highway other than the easements. So a lot of these lots, have to build within that easement to get to your property.
There's some concern about DOT or the state letting the landowners, if the cells have access to Metcalf Highway. Wasn't there a limited number of access points they were willing to discuss?
Yeah, DOT is notoriously fickle about granting easements to their highways. It doesn't mean they won't do it. There's a permit process you go through to get it. But you've got to do your homework and you've got to show them why. And I don't know that we've ever had one turned down, but it's a process. And out there, it's, they're not going to want, using 8th Street as an example. I had this conversation with PIA. We don't want 8 outlets added to 8th Street. all within a 2 mile stretch. That's just, you know, you can do better job planning your roads that way. Out, you know, Metcalf Highway, there's gonna be less issues with that because it's bigger property, it's farther apart. But, yeah, you have to go to DOT and ask for get the permit process and go through a process to get approval to cut a road off the highway. You know, I mean,
So it's doable.
it's very doable, but you have to jump through their hoops.
Process.
It is alarming when the plat says lots within the subdivision shall not have direct access to the Metcalf Highway.
Yeah, they
Sure.
won't issue a permit unless you're using the easement that's put on the plat. So you can't just go like from one of these lots out to the highway unless you're following the platted easement. And they have turned down requests for that. I think out around Papkeys Road, someone wanted to go out to the highway or something, and they said no, that you had to follow the platted on the plat because there was a restriction on the plat that the trust put on, and I believe it was at the request of DOT, yeah. So
It
that's
it
one
was
of their
in that area
statements.
also, I believe.
That note was added to the plat after DOT's review. That was their request to add that note. And essentially it, creates the burden on the developer to either use an access easement that's provided or apply directly to DOT themselves and get their own permit, which anyone has the option to do.
They do say it's case by case, but our experience is case by case, but once they read the plat, they just go back to the plat and say, well, it's not allowed under the plat, so they deny the request. So
So on this sheet, there's access at the bottom and then at the top, so.
Were those section lines that come up and butt up against Metcalf Highway then, not necessarily, they would all have 50-foot easements on them then?
Yeah, they're not section line easements, but they have the access and utility easement, yes.
But it doesn't have approved DOT access to that highway. Is that what I'm hearing, Liz?
they will only approve if you want to go through the established easement on the plat. They're not going to let you, I think there's one lot that you have to kind of go in a circle, but they'll say it's case by case when you call them, that you can apply, and they'll look at everything case by case. But as I said, people have asked, multiple people have asked, and if there's a notation on the plat saying there's no access directly to Metcalf Highway except through the platted right-of-way or easement, then they do not approve the driveway permit to let somebody go directly from their property to the highway.
If trust asks DOT and put it into your plat about access points here, 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 and here, I think DOT would probably say yes after you went through their process. But the individual owners that might buy those properties, as Liz said, would have a hell of a time if even allowed at all. That's another one of those issues that, you design the subdivision that way with access points, then it solves a whole bunch of problems for future owners.
Yeah, in my experience, DOT is very site-specific, like you've all said. It's all a case-by-case basis, so we can't really make any generalizations here. I've seen them on plats as long as there's 150 feet in some cases 250 feet. Other requirements are 500 feet, site distance on either side, and they'll allow that driveway. So it's DOT specific.
No
Seen.
consistency?
Yeah, and I've just seen, it says on the plat no, and it's no, yeah. We've had that too, so.
Have to put the no access to the highway if DOT requests it? Or can you just put that it's per the permitting process?
If there is a DOT managed road involved near the subdivision, butting a subdivision, then we require it's usually the surveyor who contacts DOT for comments. And that's pretty standard, depending on where you're at. They have a permit a permit is required for new and existing, upgrades. Or they'll say access is restricted to Jones Avenue or something. If that's what they want, that's what has to go on the plat.
Carl, do you know, I mean, or Liz, what did the hospital have to go through to get that, just for them, cut to,
I'm not aware.
yeah, I didn't think it was a big deal.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, okay. So our local hospital is working on a new site right up here, not far from the airport. And had to cut a whole new road access to State Road. And they were able to get it for just one, literally amounts to is one building.
Anybody has any questions on the plat itself? Like I said, AS 4015 is pretty simple. And the plat does meet all those requirements. So, like I said before, you know, it is a responsibility of a borough to manage their planning, plotting, and zoning regulations. So, please. Yeah.
So you're, if I understood you, we're required to do the plating?
I think it's AS 29, like 45-ish in there. Boroughs must provide for education and planning, and land use regulation. So when the borough expanded, you covered that regulation by stating that DNR would continue to be planning authority outside of Service Area 1.
That's why you're still performing that.
Waiting patiently.
Coming back, Jeff, is there any way that, with any ideas that we could work together to make some of our concerns and so forth? Do you have any ideas, or come back to us with, or vice versa, I guess, too, about working on that subdivision?
Yeah, I definitely, we're not giving up. You know, so I hope we can work together to figure out and resolve, come to consensus on whatever it is that's left. You know, I think some of the things, you know, like tonight, even like the section line easements or easement widths, if you also have questions about those after the fact, you know, there's not much we can do from our side about the condition of the soils of the land that we were conveyed. And that's why we went with such big lots, you know, that's why we didn't chop it up into postage stamp quarter-acre lots or something like that. So, and that wouldn't have fit out there, right? I mean, you know, so that's why we, like I said, that's why we kept the lots so large for the most part. So, yeah, I think we can definitely, you know, after y'all read our letter, and if we have more questions, or we want to continue the dialogue and figure out how we can make it happen. You
I
know.
think we've got the same, you know, feeling. I mean, we'd like to see the subdivision happen. but
Sure.
In a way that it's gonna be something we, you know, my kids appreciate 25, 30 years from now, instead of having something that's just, you know, not usable. So to the, you know, people wanting to buy it.
Yeah, we're dealing with some of those right now. That's why I think that brought us all to our attention real quick here, is that having people want more than we go back and say, no, that road isn't the standard, and then we keep, and so then we're bad guys all over. And so I'd like to see that fixed up front if we can. So if we can work with you to do that, that'd be great.
What's the sale process? And where are you in that process? You're waiting for us to collaboratively work together to figure out how you're gonna move forward, and then how does it happen from there?
Yeah, so the trust is required to dispose of its land competitively first. So, and there is an option for negotiated sales, but it has to be determined by the executive director to be in the best interest of the trust to do that. So we sell our land through a land sale auction is the typical process, just like the state does on general state land. Every fall, we have a land sale auction, and we'll put the lots up there first, and it's a sealed bid auction, and folks can bid. We do from time to time, if it's a unique parcel, we'll make it what we call an alternative sale, which is just a English style outcry auction at the end, if we get multiple bids on it. But there is an administrative process that we have to go through to dispose of our land. So before we can sell it, we have to go through a decision process, and we've already done that for this land here. So it's ready to sell, if like Chandler put it, if we had a product, to sell, so.
Have you established values for each lot, or
Well,
you just let that happen by bid?
oh no, we get everything appraised by a general real estate appraiser. It's all, third party. We put it out for contract via state or, by state procurement regulations and all that. So it's, an independent valuation of the land.
So you've already established values for all these lots?
No.
You have not?
No,
Oh,
no, no. I was just telling you the process. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have not done that for these. I mean, we sold a lot, not in this subdivision, but adjacent to it, last fall. And so
That
we do
one-
have,
Mouth of Blind Slough.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The fishing hole that was such a.
Call it a big
controversy.
rock.
Yeah, so the trust owns all the lots along there, on the, adjacent to the subdivision.
Right, and we generally appraise it, the spring before the sale, so that it's a current appraisal. So these haven't,
So-
we had some appraisals done last spring on some of the lots that we had planned to put in the fall land sale, but we haven't done, there's 100 lots in this subdivision. So we weren't planning on offering all of them last fall.
Well, I think we're going, if you had our blessing and move forward, you're gonna do this all at once, or, each section piecemeal?
Yeah, our original intent, as I said before, was to sell them by block. So kind of along one stretch of a public access and utility corridor, sell lots on one section. And then, as I said, the purchasers, if they chose to, could collectively organize to build or not to build, or opt out or opt in, And so I couldn't say how many years, before we had planned to sell out, but it's 100 lots, so it's a long-term investment. We're not planning on offering huge badgers. I don't think there's enough septic operators to put in those leach fields. So-
There's probably,
Start a new business.
probably not enough interest to sell 100 lots in a quick fashion, I don't suppose. So I think this was productive. It's gonna be interesting, my opinion, it's gonna be interesting to see, what Senator Stebbin was talking about, because it sounded like there would be potential funding mechanisms for development of roads, but, yeah, we'll see if we go down that road.
One other comment I have is that, early on, you guys said that, you guys are of the 1950 mandated basically to, sell these lots at the maximum benefit. But I would maintain that the maximum benefit might actually, could potentially include developing it to the point where you could receive the maximum benefit. Because access is everything. A lot of these lots, you're so far in that an individual person is not gonna be able to access it. And so, like you've heard, I think probably abundantly, is that down the road, unintended, I guess. It just, organization and structure lends itself to safety, and that's I would like to think that that would be included in, you also have a responsibility when selling these lands to the benefit of society too.
Like Chandra said, there's some people that might buy that 10-acre section or something like that and go plunk a cabin right in the middle of it and put a honey bucket out there and be totally happy, you know, but I don't think that's the way most people want to live, but.
I can't, I don't want to speak for anybody but myself, but I think that if Senator Stedman had an idea, we'd certainly entertain the idea of being a guinea pig to try it out.
Yeah.
Well, the mental health is, you know, like look at a lot of lands are accessed by water, so that's the access. This doesn't, I mean, some of them have access on the water side, but it's just a departure from how you guys have dealt with land historically. It doesn't necessarily mean that wouldn't be able to realize, you know, it'd be speculative on your part and more complicated. But in the long run, when you guys are looking at sales over a long period of time, maybe a decade even, like you, I think you said, Carl's idea of experimentation with it, you know, it wouldn't be a tremendously huge outlay if you did it in, you know, piecemeal. And then you would do it once and now you know how it works. But there's, well, you know, I was born and raised here and I'm a pilot and I do a lot of flying around this country and I get to fly over all these lands and I do forest health surveys for the Forest Service between, you know, south of Wrangell all the way to Yakutat. Every valley, every island, every drainage. And so there are some pretty far out places where you can fly over and you can look down and see somebody had an idea. Somebody got online and they go, wow, I want to buy this piece of property. And the disparity between the dream and the reality of building, it can be pretty wide. And so sometimes you see where people started something, they just didn't finish it. And that's what we don't want to see. And we have Pappy's Landing out the road where, yeah, people are left to their own designs, and then we have to deal with the fallout from it as a borough for emergency responders, sanitation, snow removal. Some of those roads can cause accidents because they can't see the ditch. You know, there is no ditch, or there's a tree or a stump and they hit something. So we're just trying to, you know, create organization and structure that lends itself to efficiency and safety down the road. And is for us aesthetically pleasing. We don't want to see a bunch of people's failed attempts at their Alaskan dream.
So I'm sure we'll have follow-up conversations because, you know, your organization is, you know, doing what they're supposed to do, sell the land for maximum profit. And I think we would also like to see land develop, but we want to be involved in the process, it sounds like, so. The other comments, or did anybody have any
Yes,
new information?
thank you for coming down. We definitely appreciate it.
Of course, I was gonna say the same thing. Thanks a lot. I know, you know, y'all spend a lot of time with us, so really appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate you coming down, yeah, so. Up, down, you came from Ketchikan, I came from Anchorage, so.
Okay, Becky, yeah, you can stop the